Oh, there.
Kamusta na kayo?
Hola, hola, everyone.
Oh,
And we were
do I participate in this? Like,
Yes.
yeah.
oh my God, I didn't practice my Tagalog. Kumusta? Kumusta's, everybody?
Oh, he hit us with both the Tagalog and Spanish. That's
Yeah.
definitely a first.
I try my best.
Yes.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Nico Blitz.
And I am Jackie Ramirez.
And we have our special guest, Anthony C. Ocampo, on the Mexipino podcast.
Hey, everybody. I'm very, very happy to be here. It's Friday.
Yes. It's
It is
Friday. Yes, it's Friday. Anthony is the author of The Latinos of Asia and Brown and Gay in LA. So we're so excited to have Anthony here to talk about. Look, he's flexing the books. I love it.
I got to. I have to. Okay, I'll stop.
No.
Oh, no.
not at
Feel
all.
free to flex it. Look, literally anything that you got to show, we are happy for you to show. 'Cause
Okay.
honestly, I mean, it's funny how we found Anthony, y'all, because we posted a clip, I want to say like months ago. And basically, the main question from that clip is, are Filipinos the Mexicans of Asia? And somebody in our comments directly referred to your book or you and
Oh.
your book. And we were like,
Yeah.
oh, like there's a whole book on this. I didn't even realize that.
Yeah.
There is a whole book on this. There wasn't a whole book on this when I was your age. But like, just kidding. But back when I was I grew up in LA, so the book is relatively new. It was published in 2016, but the concept of Filipinos and Mexicans bonding on culture and history is pretty old phenomenon. In fact, I think about the name of your podcast, Mexipino Podcast, and I'm sure one or two people have mentioned the historian Rudy Guevara, who wrote a book called Becoming Mexipino about like the historic communities and relationships between Filipino and Mexicans stemming back to like early 20th century.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that if you just think of Mexicans and Filipinos together as a culture, like we obviously think of like Spain, the conquerors and whatnot of both of our countries. But, it's interesting to not know that information if you didn't already. And then you
Mhm.
just see all these similarities, whether it come to like the language that we speak, the food that
Religion.
we eat, religion, like there's so many similarities that go with that. And honestly, like with this podcast, we've found that there are so many Mexipinos in this world. It's
Oh,
ridiculous.
there are from San Diego to the Bay, and I mean, even as
Yeah.
far as Texas, y'all definitely exist. Who am I saying y'all to? I'm sorry.
No,
You
that's
all
totally fine.
Mexicanos in the world.
Yes.
You're all out there, and absolutely. And I think to your point, these these Mexipino folks are obviously part of families, and I think family is one of the first environments where you really started to notice these similarities between the two cultures.
Definitely. And like, so speaking about family, like being Filipino and growing up in LA, because I know when Nico first came out here to LA, it was kind of a huge cultural shift for him. He's like, oh my
Huge.
God, there's so many like Latinos, there's so many Mexicans. Like, did you find that you were struggling as like to find, if your identity being Filipino and growing up in Eagle Rock?
No, not too much. So I grew up most of my life in Eagle Rock. Before that, I was maybe like a couple years in K Town, and then a couple years in Highland Park, Glassell Park, that area. So this is all to say I've been around just like immigrant communities my entire life, even in Eagle Rock, which is a big number, which has a lot of white residents. As you know, in neighborhoods, you kind of kick it with who you kick it with. And most of the folks that were in my school, church were either immigrants or children of immigrants. Growing up, I was, a lot of people who are Asian American or Filipino that grow up in other places in the country, or even like Latino in other places of the country might say things like, oh, I thought a lot about not fitting in because I was the only brown person and whatever. But to be honest, like most of my life, I was never the only. I went to elementary school in Glendale, which is right next to Eagle Rock.
Yeah.
And like, I wish I had a school picture, because if you looked at it, it's like 99.9% of the students in the class were either Filipino or Mexican American or some other like Latino group. Maybe there was like one Armenian, one white person, but to be honest, like the average student in that school was either Filipino or Mexican.
Yeah, you know what? It was so weird because even growing up, I felt like Filipinos were like the majority. Because, I grew up in San Francisco, Daly City area, where it's basically Metro Manila to the rest of
Yeah.
the world. And so when I do end up branching out to like Los Angeles, I'm like, wow, like the world's a lot bigger than what I thought it was, honestly.
It
But yeah, like
is.
I never really had that like an identity crisis because everyone around me was just black and brown.
And I'm not knocking anyone that does, right? I mean, I have a
Yeah.
lot of friends that grew up in predominantly white areas, but I feel like those are certain experiences when you grow up in those places, like feeling different when you go to the your white friend's house, or feeling like embarrassed if you invite your white friends over. First of all, I didn't have any white friends.
Oh, bro.
So like,
yeah, neither did I growing up.
I'm like, do I have any right now?
Bro, my white friends do not know how to take off their shoes
Oh
when
my
they
God.
get into my apartment.
Yes. And so I never had that box experience. It was normative for people to go to school. I'm like a 7-8-year-old, and then like the kid next to me has his like scrambled eggs and rice, and the other one has adobo and rice. The other one is eating whatever. And I think that was very lucky in that respect, because I spent like the first 13 years of my life until I went to like a wider high school, that I didn't even have to blink, and that plays a big role, because it shapes all sorts of things: who you see as cool, who you see as attractive, who your role models are, things like that. And I have never once in my life ever wanted to be white. And again, I'm not knocking folks who because of their environment feel that way at some point, but that just never crossed my mind.
But what's so crazy about that, and I've told Jackie about this a bunch of times, but when I went back to the Philippines, I want to say maybe around 2008, 2009, that's when I discovered that there was this whitening cream that a lot of Filipinos use, and the beauty standard in the Philippines was just lighter skin. It was literally told to the people, if you have darker skin, you're not as beautiful as someone who's like lighter skinned. It's ridiculous to me, and that still kind of goes on today.
Oh, it goes on. I mean, think about when you watch television that's transmitted from the Philippines or from Mexico. Who do you see as like the main stars, the newscasters, the people that are portrayed as having good lives? It's almost always like the light-skinned blonde Mexicans from Mexico City or places of that sort of Guadalajara.
No,
or
absolutely.
He said
like
the blonde Mexicans.
No, literally.
There is.
I
My
know.
mom,
I know.
and it's funny that you say Guadalajara, because my mom's from Guadalajara and she's like fair skinned, and has dark hair, but some of her cousins are blonde, blue eyed, and they look white. And I look at them, and I remember growing up, and I was just like, what happened? What happened to me? Because that was like what I thought was. That's what I thought was beautiful, and that's why, like, I always saw my brown skin, and I was just like, okay, well, why can't I be like that?
Yeah.
And so, but you definitely change after, like, growing up and understanding. It's like, it's okay to not look like that.
It is. And in the Philippines, as you know, Nico and Jackie, I'm sure Nico has showed you images of like the artistas in the Philippines. A lot of them are actually multiracial and half white. I shouldn't say half white. They're full Filipino, but they are the children of a white and a Filipino parent. So you think about sorry, I'm queer, so I'm always thinking about the guys. But like I'm like Gerald Anderson and oh my god, what is that other dude's name? Sam Milby. These are like prominent Filipino actors who are, they have one white parent and one Filipino parent.
Low-key, now that I think about it, Inigo Pascual kind of looks a little more like on the light-skinned side too.
Right. In other words, they think of Filipinos who don't quote unquote look Filipino as the ones that get elevated for stardom.
And you know what's so crazy about that too is, and this is another topic that just gets blasted in our comment section, is that a lot of people from the Philippines don't see like quarter Filipinos or half Filipinos as like Filipinos.
Yeah.
Like they don't champion them, which is like crazy to me, because going back to what you said, it's like if in the Philippines they're pushing like, these Hapa looking Filipino, Hapa meaning like, like half something, half Filipino. It's a weird dynamic where if you don't champion them because they are half, but then that's what the country is pushing out as like, well, these are the people you're gonna have to look up to anyway.
Yeah, it's what is the word? Ironic? Paradox? I should know this.
Yeah, it's ironic. It's an ironic paradox.
Yeah, it's an ironic paradox. But to your point, like, there's a lot of litmus tests that happen with Filipinos. If you're from the United States, if you grew up here, a lot of Filipinos over there don't consider you a full Filipino. I mean, just go on Twitter right now. There's a whole lot of banter in Filipino Twitter about who's really Filipino based around this whole concept of Filipinx, which if folks don't know is kind of like Latinx. It's supposed to be inclusive of folks who are non-binary or trans. Anyway, I'm not gonna get into this because I'm not trying to get into that fight. I mean, we can, but like people on the internet, like, don't come for me. But to your point, it is the case that like folks who are multiracial, folks who are lighter skinned get associated with like privilege and beauty in both the Mexican context and the Philippine context.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, because you wrote your book, The Latinos of Asia, I'm sure you know like the background too of like how Mexicans in Mexico view Mexicans here, and that's how the term Chicano started. You're like smaller than. It's like Chico. Yeah, so that's where, and like Nico didn't know that before I had met him, where Chicano comes from like Chico meaning small, and it's just smaller than whatever we are. And so it's very interesting. It's super like it's almost kind of weird because it's like, well, I practice everything that we practice over there. It might not be, I might not go through the hardships that you go through over there, but I'm still going through it over here.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's the issue when folks apply this litmus test. They think that like folks in the US who are of the same ethnicity have this like easy life. And obviously, if there's anything we've known to be quite clear in the past couple of years, that's absolutely not the case, because racism, we're living in a black-white society where a lot of folks just literally don't know what we are, who we are, or what we're about, because our images aren't transmitted on television or haven't been for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about Filipinos in the United States, people will probably only think of Manny Pacquiao. I think people forget that who's the guy in all the Adam Sandler movies? He's Filipino too. Rob Schneider.
Rob Schneider.
Yeah.
Really? He's Filipino.
I did not even know that.
Yeah. And he's from out here, so the Bay Area got another win with that.
Yeah.
But even Rob Schneider, I don't think a lot of people would like get that right off the top.
No. I don't think even I did when I first saw him on movies, until I forgot what movie it was. I only remember Joey Lawrence again. I was gay,
probably
so like, but it was one where his mom was a guest on the movie, or like she like made a cameo and she had raspberry bibinka or something like that.
Oh,
it was like,
no other culture has raspberry.
I was like, who the hell? Can you curse on this thing? Like,
yes,
okay.
Yeah.
Like, who the fuck is gonna talk about raspberry bibinka in Hollywood? Sure as hell is not gonna be a white person doing that. So when I like look through well, we didn't have Wikipedia back then, but at some point, like you found on the internet that Rob Schneider is Filipino, and of course Manny Pacquiao's Filipino. They're not my favorite Filipinos, but I mean,
I mean, amongst favorite Filipinos, we don't have too many to choose from.
I know, it's hard. I can't like. That's why it's so heartbreaking when Manny Pacquiao does the whole like homophobic comment, or Rob Schneider has his like. You know what Rob Schneider has said in recent years, but I'm just like, oh no, that's like one person that we can all look to who represent us. But that, I mean, that in and of itself is a big problem. And thank goodness there's a variety of other Filipinos these days, and all over like Hollywood, slowly making their way in. Like,
yeah, we have that guy from Spider-Man.
We got Ned.
Yes,
Spider-Man.
Yes, and his Lola.
And Ned's got a new show, so we got to support his show about like vampires or something.
Yeah, I saw that. That's just super interesting. I'm super excited to see all that, and I wanted to quickly touch base because I know that you are part of the LGBTQ community, and I always told Nico I thought the Philippines were always so progressive because Nico has always told me that in the Philippines there's always the ma'am sir. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like, you guys are so progressive. But then I see, these comments that, big figures in the Filipino community make. And I'm just like, but wait, aren't you like, isn't the Philippines super progressive? Like, I don't like, and it's very confusing. It really is.
Yeah, I think I feel similarly in that I assumed, because growing up in the Philippines, you have a lot of interaction with people who are bakla, which is like slang for gay, or in the Philippines they'll refer to women who are queer or gender transgressing as tomboys, and so they're present. I wouldn't say they're present in a way that like is, they're not elevated as like political leaders or anything like that. There's a lot of stars, but like it's still the case that they're not elevated to like Ellen DeGeneres status. But it is the case that like in the Philippines it's totally considered okay to play with gender and gender norms. I wouldn't say like my family is like, you should go do drag, but like in the Philippines it's not considered completely unacceptable to have a family member who is gender transgressing. But then you think the Philippines doesn't have like same-sex marriage. In fact, it doesn't even have abortion rights or divorce. And then places like Mexico, obviously they were one of the first countries to legalize same-sex marriage. I think I've been evolving in my thinking about this a little bit, because I know it's like tempting to say like the US is progressive, or Western countries are progressive and other countries are more conservative, but I think it's a little bit more complicated, right? I think it's just different. The way gender is over there is different. And there have for a long time been trans or gender transgressing Filipinos that have been present in those like cities and communities that have been there for a long time in a way where they weren't hiding in the shadows in the same way, say like in the 1980s United States or something.
No, definitely. And so how, I know, without giving too much of your book away and like what you wrote in there, how was it growing up being brown and gay in LA for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Obviously as like a 5-year-old I wasn't like I'm gay, but like so it was very much this very gradual non-linear process where I realized there were moments in which the way I wanted to act or the people I was attracted to in a particular way that wasn't just like friendship, I was like, oh, this is incorrect, And then of course people check you real quick if you seem to have too much of an affinity for another boy, or if you act effeminately, which in and of itself doesn't mean you're gay. I think it's really important to disentangle like gender expression, gender presentation, and sexual identity, because those can be two very different things. Like you can have a straight guy who's has femme vibes, and you can have a a queer guy who presents masculine, for example, and that happens a lot. So growing up, I to be honest, I really didn't really put two and two together till much later in life. I think I can talk about what happened in retrospect, and I can say this because that's the cool thing about having written this book is I got to interview other Mexican American, Latino, Filipino American gay men and ask them, what was your experience? What was the first time you felt different? And then I realized, I was like, oh shit, all the stuff that happened in my life is not too different than what was happening in their life. And what I mean is that, you have an inclination to have crushes on boys instead of girls, or to find boys attract. I mean, here's the thing about me being gay, like at a young age, if someone during the age when guys are like, oh man, she's fine, like this is like junior high or whatever, like, oh that girl is fine, and oh man, whatever, like all the gay guys, myself included, are like, oh my god, she's so pretty. which is obviously different. It's like admiring beauty, but obviously it's in a different wavelength than like, oh my god, she's so fine. It's not about desirability, for example. So
yeah.
And then of course, like growing up, I had a lot of, probably anyone that was categorized as my best friend was probably me having a secret crush. And
how many best friends did you have?
You're like, well,
he just flickered his eyes.
No, I have a lot of best friends. I mean, but it's like, if you're straight, you can have these close relationships that can blossom into something romantic and whatever. You get to partake in the rituals of like courtship and dating and, first kiss, first whatever, first holding hands, first pictures, couples pictures at Star Shots, whatever. And so you guys remember those, like at the mall?
Yeah, like the ones
oh
at the
my
mall.
god, like at Claire's?
No.
So it was like, it kind of had like the background of like the graffiti background ones. And then like, yeah. So I have one of those with my aunt, and that's so embarrassing.
Oh my god, with your aunt? We need to pull that one up.
You really do.
I think I might have it on my phone. Well, it's because she would go with her friends, and I was super young, and I always wanted to go with her. And my grandma would always tell her, like, if you want to go, you're going to take her. And she was just like, okay, so we will go. And I was there. So she'd just be like, okay, I guess we're taking pictures then. Oh my gosh. I really hope I have it. Oh, here it is. Like, this is one of them.
All our YouTube viewers get the exclusive right now.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Okay. I am like clowning on you right now, but I'm realizing that age-wise, me and your aunt are probably closer in age than me and you, because I'm 41, so
my aunt is 35, 36, 37.
Yeah. You want to guess Jackie's age right now?
No. What is Jackie's age?
I'm 23, gonna be 24 this year.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
I love that.
I'm not too far off. Okay?
Oh my gosh. Wow. So Jackie is 23 years old with the social media famous influencer podcast with Nico, and her voice will be projected throughout one of the biggest cities in the country through 92.3. That's huge. Congratulations.
Thank you. I mean, when you put it in like that, I was like, wow, I didn't really think about that.
Look, see, he was plugging your shit before he plugged the book.
I know.
Oh yeah, I do. I'm more than happy to plug other people's shit. I'm much better at doing that than plugging my own shit. But so yeah. Anyway, fuck. What were we talking about? We're talking about Star Shots. What was the actual topic before that?
Oh my gosh,
I don't even know where we went. The Star Shots were that was a vibe though.
Yeah,
we're talking about friendships and like
being gay.
Being gay, yes.
Yeah. So I mean, again, like there's no growing up in the United States. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so the only images I had of gay people were, and this is parallel to a lot of the people I interviewed, were white gay men. Almost always was related to like either the AIDS epidemic or doing drag in some sort of way. We didn't have shows like I just literally burped on your podcast. Can you like
It's
edit
totally
that
Actually,
out?
I didn't even hear the burp. You're good to go.
Oh, great! I just called myself out. But we didn't have shows like Love Victor or shows that featured like queer POC main characters, and that was in a lot of ways what that does is it makes it seem like all those feelings that you have, you can't make sense of it because you don't see it rendered on screen, or you don't see it rendered on the page. And then even in like everyday life, like it's not like every closeted gay kid was coming out of the closet at that time. So I literally thought I was like solo in the feelings that I was having. And it wasn't until I was in my early 20s that, I made my way to my first gay club, and then went, and I was like, holy shit, it's like a bunch of like brown dudes with fades and shaved heads, and like, oh my god, there's like one of the guys I interviewed talks about the same experience of going their first like gay POC party, and was like, oh shit, like look over there's like cholos making out with each other and grinding up on each other. And that's
hilarious.
just and that was like the epiphany to be like, oh shit, like gay people go beyond just those caricatures that you see on television, or
like
people that
like
flamboyant. And to a big fault of mine early on coming out was that I valorized the gay men who were more masked or could pass as straight, quote unquote.
Wow.
Like that was like the thing, like so that was the thing of like when you're new to the gay scene, you're like, oh, all the guys that are considered attractive or hot are all the ones that are like hyper masculine. So you, in your mind, you think like, oh, that's like, if I'm going to be gay, I want to be like that kind of gay. And in retrospect, I realize how incredibly fucked up that is, because the reality is, in history, it's the flamboyant, effeminate queer folks that were the ones to like put themselves out there and fight for gay rights way more than the gay folks that could like fit in. Anyway, I'm kind of digressing into like queer history because I feel like everyone needs to know it. But
we love it. We
absolutely.
love it. I like, honestly, I didn't even realize that existed, because that's just personally not in like me and Jackie's what am I trying to say, babe? Help me out. Throw me a word.
I don't know.
It like
I'm normally good at finishing your sentences. I don't know what you're trying to say though.
And finishing amongst other things.
Oh my
But I
God.
digress. But like, I'm not gay and Jackie's not gay, so we don't have that experience to really like understand that is what goes on in that community.
Yeah, and that's part of what I wanted to write about, is because for so long, me and these other men grew up essentially being really silent for most of our lives, and no one really is knowing what's happening. In fact, a lot of folks talk about how like their parents didn't even know they were gay until like they said something, because again, like they fit the norms of like masculinity or whatever. But the thing I learned is like, oh man, in writing this book and interviewing a lot of folks, I found myself and when I say falling in love, I wasn't literally falling in love with it, but like falling in love with the stories of the queer men who were like the most flamboyant, because I'm like, they're the ones who walk the streets courageously and being all out about themselves and being called whatever, and then they're just still being themselves. And so that's one of the lessons I learned from writing that book, is that I'm almost like embarrassed to say early on, I was like, aspiring to be this like masculine gay guy, and nowadays I'm like, there's so much power in being effeminate and being like like bending the rules of gender. I wish I did that way more as a kid, because I felt like I do it now, so it would have been amazing to just be able to be myself back then.
So question, is there a, I guess, disparity between the more flamboyant people in your community versus the more, I guess, masculine?
Yeah, so I think like if I'm being honest, like in a lot of, how do I say this? Like there is the category LGBTQ, right?
Yeah.
But there's a hierarchy in all those letters where you have like gay men who adhere to the rules of gender norms at the top, and then like trans women of color,
Wow.
have the least amount of privilege, and then everything in between, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to like the gay scene and dating, of course, there are all different sorts of gender expressions, from hyper masculine to hyper effeminate to everything in between, like folks that blend the two. It's hard to categorize folks in one or the other, because so many of my friends, like, we kind of code switch when it comes to our gender presentation depending on the context, you know.
Ah,
Yeah, so it's just, and it's not even like a conscious thing. It's like when you're with your queer homies, you can be like, hey girl, da 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 da, and then when you're in
Mm-hmm.
like everyday life at work, that I'm not calling my boss hey girl, so
yeah.
so it's this is all to say, like, there is a hierarchy, and I think all you need to do is look at, um, for a very long time there's been a hierarchy: who's considered attractive in the gay scene, who gets hired as like the bartenders, the go-go dancers, who gets put on the flyers, who gets to be the leader for the gay community.
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time there was this push to have folks that didn't disrupt heterosexual world. But nowadays I think folk we're reckoning with the fact that, like, that's terrible. There should be, like, the idea that you discriminate against someone because they're effeminate, or you think they're less attractive because they're effeminate, that makes you fucked up. Not like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
there's this, I remember early on when I was coming into my like gay identity in the gay scene, I would hear folks say things like, oh, like effeminate gay men are like giving us butch gay men a bad name, whatever. And I used to like low key believe that, and then over time I'm like, no, actually, that's like internalized homophobia or internalized queer phobia.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's
Mm-hmm.
the equivalent of saying like, I can't believe my Mexican friends switched between Spanish and English when we were with our white friends. Like, it's so embarrassing to us. Or
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I can't believe that Nico brought Didiguan to the potluck. That's
Yeah.
so embarrassing, and I think the same thing is at play when gay men are disparaging effeminate men in the gay scene. But the reality
Mm-hmm.
is, it's still the case that, like, on dating apps and who's considered attractive, a lot of times, masculine gay men carry a certain privilege that effeminate gay men do not. It's not that
Mm-hmm.
simple, but like, I'm giving you
Yeah.
like the oversimplified version of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hear that. I have another question too. Like, Jackie and I talk about all the time how, growing up, there wasn't too many Filipinos on camera to look at. There weren't too many Mexicans to look at on camera. But, relatively speaking to this conversation, like, there weren't too many gay people who were
Mm-hmm.
also on camera as well. I think nowadays we're definitely seeing more Filipinos. We're seeing more Mexicans. We're seeing more gay people on screen. And I guess my question would be like, I feel like it's easier for Filipinos to do this. And by this, I mean like do a podcast, because you see so many Filipinos doing podcasts. You
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
see Mexicans, more as DJs. You see Mexicans more as hosts. Like, I guess for you and like your perspective,
Mm-hmm.
do you think it's easier for someone to come out now because we just see so many images and so many movies and just so many people of the LGBTQIA community out there now?
I think yes and no, right? I think that
Mm-hmm.
there's examples where I would see like, oh, if I was 10 years old and I had a show like Love Victor or one of these
Mm-hmm.
other, like, if I had Netflix and I could just literally type gay movie, that would have helped me a lot, because I would have been able to grapple with the feelings I was having instead of doing
Right.
it alone. So I think on that and the representation front, it's there is some ways in which um, there's more opportunities to learn about gay identity,
Mm-hmm.
and it's easier. It's like with the push of a button. But then, if I was a gay kid in Florida,
Yeah.
where they're like literally trying to pass laws saying like you can't talk about your experience or read books about your experience. I'm not privy to what it's like to have grown up in a relatively progressive society, and then all of a sudden these asshole white Republican idiots are trying to like fuck with my life by like taking books away, right? They like
Mhm.
Yeah.
they let guns roam the streets, like, and mass shooters roam the streets. When it comes to books, like that's where their concerns are. It's just that shit would like fuck with my head a
Yeah.
lot. So
Yeah.
it's there's pros and cons, and of course throughout all of this, like it's a really good practice, and I learned this from reading a lot of like black feminist theory and black women thinkers and writers. It's a good rule of thumb whenever you're asking the question of like, are things getting better for this particular group, in this case like gay people or LGBTQ people. The best thing you can do is to look at the folks who have the least amount of privilege here and look at their lives and say, okay, are their lives getting better? And if the answer is no, then we got a lot of work to do. So in this
Mhm.
case, there's a lot of like low income, like black and brown trans women who are literally unable to exist. Like people
Yeah.
are like killing them on the streets, or people are violently hurting them on the streets. When it comes to getting a job,
Mhm.
it's not the same experience if you are a trans woman of color trying to get a job, which is why you see so many trans women of color in sex work, because that's one of the few areas where they can find a occupational niche, and that's a reality that we have to face. Is like, as much as like we like look at someone like Pete Buttigieg and he ran for president, yes, that's nice and whatever, but like if there's a black trans woman in New York that's being murdered for being herself, then can we really say that progress is happening?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dang. Wow. I just got the chills after you said that. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. I feel like I could just listen to you talk for days.
Oh my
Like,
No,
gosh.
literally.
insane.
No, and I was listening to like Nico and I were both speaking of like listening to you talk. We were watching your video when you spoke at UCLA. I believe it was when you spoke at UCLA.
Oh yeah.
Let me
You're
also
like,
plug that Jackie hosts for UCLA basketball, women's basketball, and football.
Wait, do you play for UCLA? Wait, what?
no, so I'm an entertainment host at men's and women's basketball games. So, when we're doing the t-shirt tosses or everything like that,
No.
that's me. Yeah. And then this season I'm actually doing UCLA football.
At Poly Pavilion in the Rose Bowl?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm like, oh my god, sports. But the only sports event, I went to UCLA for 7 years for grad school,
Uh-huh.
and I never once went to a football or basketball game, but I have been to UCLA gymnastics competitions.
There you
So
Yeah.
go.
there
Hey,
you
I
go.
heard their gymnastics competitions are
They're
amazing.
fire. Can I say fire? I'm like 41 years old trying to say
Yeah.
fire. But like, no, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So
Well,
you do sport. You're like a sports like
Host, yeah.
you interview people after the game and such, or
So no, what I do is more of the entertainment aspect of the sports world.
Mhm.
So when it comes to like, I do Dodgers as well. So when
Mhm.
I'm at Dodgers, in between the innings, we'll have like a cap shuffle game or like a trivia game with the fan,
Uh-huh.
and that it gets projected onto the screens in the stadium. So I'm that
Ah.
entertainment host there. So it's basically kind of like best way I can explain it is like being like news for the team.
Got it. But at the
That's the
heart of
best.
it,
Yes.
I have to acknowledge that like Nico, a Filipino man, is like celebrating his woman. Like that is I
Oh
want
my
to
God.
acknowledge, like, we have such low standards for straight men, but like it's really important that it's like,
I
oh
love
my
that.
god.
yo,
It's like,
dead.
wow, they sent me a text that's so romantic. But yeah, no, I think it's really great that like I think it's really wonderful to see like in relationships that
Yeah.
you know
You know what's so funny about that is that
Mhm.
on the so we pre-recorded a podcast with this is actually going to be the episode after this one
Okay.
with this Mexican comedian named Jesus Sepulveda,
Mm.
and he was talking about how I guess Asian men, Filipino men are just so much more nicer.
Oh,
But he said it in a very comedic way, like
Oh wow. I mean, that is
in regards to like relationships.
oh my gosh, I don't know. I've had my fair share of trifling Filipino men in my lives and trifling Asian men and my fair share of like
oh
incredibly
my God.
wonderful Latino guys in my life. So
That's so funny.
it's I think I get what he's saying. Like there's
Yeah.
there's a certain like machismo is sort of a topic that is important to talk about, or it's at large, like patriarchy and in general, right? I don't want to like specifically say it's like this group is particularly, misogynist or patriarchal, because I think all groups are in their own way. But yeah, I the comedy. So we're like talking about a lot of things. We have the UCLA thing, and then the comedy thing. I feel like I could go. This is like a fork in the road. I could go either way. You want to talk like UCLA, that speech I gave a couple years ago?
We should go to UCLA first, because
Okay.
we were going into Jackie's question.
Yeah. I honestly forgot my question at this point, but like what I was trying to say is that like it's very interesting to me how you went and did that for, I think it was the sociology department, I believe.
As for like the it was like was it a graduation speech or just a regular?
No, it was just a regular.
That was like an hour long.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I was wearing. Gosh.
It was for the Chicanos Research Center.
Yes. Oh man, I wish they didn't disable the comments, because you talk about your comment section being like
crazy
a lot. Like that comment section was just oof. Like before there was TikTok and Instagram was a thing, like that comment section was just like lit.
Well, what was going on?
Oh, people fighting about like the topic that I was writing about. The talk that Jackie's referring to has to do with the right before the book came out.
There you go.
Yeah, shameless plug. Hey,
plug it.
What is it?
Asia.
Is it the Patreon people that get to see this? Like I don't know. It's
this the people on YouTube.
Everybody. Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, YouTubers. Yeah. So I did that talk at the UCLA Chicano Research Center. And it was basically just talking about my book, about how historically, the Spain colonized both the Philippines and Mexico, and even though that's something that was in the past, there's still a lot of like cultural legacies from that era, like you talked about earlier with Catholicism, the words in Filipino language that are similar to Spanish, like baso, mesa, zapatos, things like that. Obviously, like when you hear Tagalog and Spanish, it doesn't sound exactly the same, but the fact that those words exist and people are like, how the fuck is this group from Asia and this group from Latin America?
Oh yeah,
like they got the same words. Like how the fuck did that happen? And part of it, like,
but not all the words are always like correlating with each other. You say puta in Mexico is different from saying puta in the Philippines.
It is. Puto is something you eat. I guess like that can sound really weird depending on who's listening to that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. But yeah, the similarities are definitely there. And it's crazy because prior to like, me being with Nico and me getting to know Nico and dating him, I wasn't really aware of like, Filipinos in general. I had gotten like, I was working a job as like an administrative assistant at my college or my JC, and the receptionist there, she started speaking Tagalog to me, and I was like looking at her, I was like, I can make out some of these words, but like most of it I don't understand. She goes, oh, you're not Filipino? I was like, I'm Mexican. But she's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, you look Filipino. I was like, okay. I was like, all right, cool.
We'll take it. We'll take the dub.
Yeah, it happens a lot in LA. And to be honest, when we signed onto the podcast, like I was like, who's the Filipino one? Who's the Mexican?
It's funny. It's so funny because I just went to the barber shop the other day. Shout out to my barber Ranjo. But he was even telling me, he was like, bro, if it wasn't for the name of the podcast, Mexipino, I would have totally just guessed your girl is Filipino. And ironically too, in the comment section, it's weird. I'm from the Bay Area. I'm Filipino.
Mm-hmm.
Jackie's Mexican from East LA. People think Jackie is from the Bay and is Filipino. People think I'm Mexican and from Los Angeles. It's a weird dynamic. But to that point, you had a very interesting term, and I'm not sure if you coined it, but you said cultural chameleon.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and please correct me if I'm wrong with this term, but basically, like, let's just say you're Filipino, and if you're a Filipino and you live in K-Town, for example, you're more than likely to feel more Asian. But if you're Filipino and you're in East LA, you're more than likely to feel more Mexican.
Yeah. So this is all part of the concept of race. I know that like race has been a topic, front page news, because like white people discovered racism yesterday. But
that exists?
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
What?
Oh my gosh, I love that.
So anyway, race is just something that we both grew up and we all grew up with, and race is a lot more complicated than the box you check on a form when you're getting your driver's license or registering to vote. Race is, of course, like an identity that you consider yourself. Like I could say that I'm whatever. People could say they're Asian American. People could say they're Black. That's their self-identified race. But then race also involves the way other people see you, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm an employer and I get Nico Triunfante's resume on my desk, am I gonna assume that this is some like look at this Asian dude's resume, right? I'm not gonna think that, because the names are gonna cue for me in my head, like, oh, this person's Latino, right? Or if I see, if I see Jackie, I don't know, let's say that you're at
Ramirez.
Jackie Ramirez, right? If I see Jackie Ramirez and she is at the Cheesecake Factory sitting next to, and the table next to her is a group of nurses, and the table next to her is a group of like Filipino girls. Like that environment is it's going to make me calculate in my head that, oh, that girl in the middle of them is Filipina, right?
Yeah.
I think I thought of, actually, the original title of the book was supposed to be Racial Chameleons. But then, and it was this idea that what race you are, kind of like a chameleon. What color a chameleon is depends on the background surrounding them. What race you are depends on the background surrounding you. So I low-key wanted that to be the title of the book, but obviously, like, they were like, people will pick up the book if you title it differently. So I went with this title. But because it'll make people both excited and angry, and that's a good thing for sales.
Absolutely.
Great.
So,
absolutely.
But yeah, to your point about like the background, like the chameleons idea, I think this idea that how Filipinos are perceived racially is really going to depend on who's surrounding them. And it's not even just the way they look. Like, as I mentioned with the resume example, like Nico could be one of these Filipinos who looks super like East Asian looking, or it could be one of these Filipinos who looks as Nico does, like could be mistaken for Mexican. But I'm not going to know that if I'm just looking at a resume.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for
absolutely.
sure. And I think at one point in my life when I first moved to LA, I definitely looked a little bit Mexican, just based off the barber. I've told Jackie this, and I actually told my barber this the other day. I was like, when I first went to LA, I went to a Mexican barber, and for better or less terms, like, he gave me a very Mexican looking haircut.
Okay.
But when I went to a Filipino barber, he cut it exactly how I figured he was gonna cut it, and I was like, it's so interesting how, like, just even when it came down to just going to a specific barber shop, like the way like a Mexican person cuts versus the way a Filipino person cuts is just completely different.
Oh, it is. My Puerto Rican friend who's from New York and lives in the Bay, he won't go to a Mexican barber. He goes to a Filipino barber because he feels like the Filipino barber can cut it more Puerto Rican-y than like the Mexican barber.
Puerto Rican-y, yo. I'm
No,
sick.
definitely. I mean, and I also think it's like Nico has told me, and I've never seen him with a mustache, but he said, he goes, I look a lot more Hispanic or Latino when I have a mustache. And I was like, okay. I was like, interesting.
Yeah.
It's like, just
Well,
keep the beard.
well, you know what's
Mhm.
funny too, growing up is that so my beard, like this patch over here started growing maybe around, I don't know, high school or something.
Oh
And
wow.
so I thought it was just going to be this. And then next thing you know, as the years go by, the beard gets more full.
Mm-hmm.
So my Lola, my grandma, she was like, "Hey, where did you get the beard from?" I'm like, "I don't know." Like, cuz literally no one else in my family has a beard.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you look at my history, I believe it's my great great grandfather Carmelo Triunfante.
Uh-huh.
Um, he has a beard.
Yeah.
And looking at him, like I will look at an old photo of him and I'm like, wow, like he looks way more Spaniard.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mhm.
despite the fact that maybe this beard makes me look more Hispanic, I still feel like I identify more with, I guess, Asian
Mm-hmm.
culture.
Yeah, and I think that to your point, I mean, you grew up in the Bay, right? And so,
Yeah,
Mhm.
in some ways, like I think in the Bay, like Asian American culture is very much
huge.
like huge. It's at the center, and in LA, like Latino culture, specifically like Mexican American culture, is kind of like the default culture in a lot of places throughout LA.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um, and so it makes sense that like your sensibilities would be drawn a certain way. But to your point, like a mustache, a beard, that can change everything. And this is like the experience you guys are talking about is really um funny because when you think about, I know we talked a lot about representation in Hollywood, like a lot of the Filipinos that were trying to break into Hollywood or the music industry, because like you couldn't break in as an Asian artist, they got sold and plugged as like Latino artists, even
Mhm.
though they
Yeah.
weren't. Like you could think of that one dude in a West Side Story. I never watched it, but like one
Uh,
like Chino or
Anthony,
whatever.
is it Anthony? I think it's his name's Anthony. I know who you're talking about, but I
The
think his
old
name's
one,
An.
the old one,
Oh, the old one.
not Anthony
Oh,
Ramos.
no,
The
not.
like the one with Rita Moreno, long
Oh,
time ago.
okay. Oh, I can't remember. I know who you're talking about that too, but I don't even remember his name.
No. I'd never seen West Side Story, but my boyfriend loves West Side Story, and he's like, "You have to watch West Side Story." So one time we watched West Side Story, and I was watching this, and I clocked one of the main actors. I was like, "There's that motherfucker's Filipino, right?" And so I looked, and he
Uh,
was Filipino, but like he was playing a Puerto Rican because he fit
wow.
the imagination of what a Puerto Rican in New York looked like. And
Hmm.
who played Richie Valens in the movie La Bamba was Lou Diamond
Yeah.
Yeah.
Phillips.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if folks will remember this singer, but there's a house dance pop singer named Jocelyn Enriquez,
Yes.
Mhm.
who,
Baby human.
there you go, put in the show notes. But
All
yeah,
right.
she was actually kind of like pushed as a Latin singer because of the way she looked and the type of songs she sang were kind of on the like freestyle, like bordering on freestyle music, which is seen as very like Latino, even if it's
Mhm.
Yeah.
many different races that do freestyle music. But yeah, it's race is complicated and it's messy, and we often like to think of race as like really fitting in neat boxes, but the term Asian only came about like in the 1960s. Like prior to that, it wasn't like
Mm.
Filipinos and Japanese and Chinese folks were like, "Hey, brother." Like there was a lot of and there wasn't like Mexicans and Cubans and Puerto Ricans were like, "Hey, brother, sister." They weren't. They were
Mhm.
very much divided geographically, occupationally, regionally, and so they never saw
Mhm.
themselves as part of the same category until like during the civil rights movement in the 60s, when groups were starting to rally around the concept of identity, racial identity in particular.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I've interviewed so many artists over the past couple of years, especially being in LA. And whenever it came to Filipino artists, like you can say Inigo Pascual, you can say Ruby Ibarra,
Mhm.
the list kind of goes on and on. I always have this disparity within myself to ask the question, what's it like being Filipino in the industry? Because you get what I'm saying? Because you don't ask like a white person, like, hey, what's it like being white in the industry, brother? You don't ask that to a black person or anything like that. And although I do feel like it's important to ask that question because, again, there aren't as many Filipinos as I'd like to be in the industry, music industry, entertainment industry, and all that. But I want it to get to a point where I don't need like that question shouldn't even matter.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it's similarly too, like, going back to like being gay, it's like, how many times am I going to have to ask a gay rapper or a gay entertainer, like, what's it like being gay in the industry? Where can't we just have like a conversation where it's like not even about that, like not about it being always about culture, it always being about race. Like that's the point I
Yeah.
want to get. I want to get to in this world.
Yeah, I can commiserate with your question, right? Because in a lot of ways, when Anthony is living his everyday life, I'm not walking around the streets being like, "Hello, it's me, gay Filipino," right?
Yeah.
I'm like, look at me. I'm like, I have actual like regular personality traits. I say fuck a lot. Like, I think I'm sweet, but I'm also really irreverent. Like when I think about what makes up Anthony, like yes, he's Filipino and he writes about these things and queer stuff as well. But like at the heart of it, I think of myself as like in with characteristics that any person can have regardless of race. And it would be wonderful if like actors, artists, writers, musicians could just be graded or assessed or greenlit based purely on talent, right?
Yeah.
The issue is there's two things going on. Number one, all the people in power in Hollywood, the music industry, etc., overwhelmingly, like 90+% of the people who make decisions about what becomes a song, what becomes a record, who gets cast for a movie, what movies get greenlit, which shows get a pilot, which pilots get to be series. 98% of the people that make those decisions are white men or
Yeah.
some white women, but mostly white men. And so what gets considered valuable for TV or the music industry is very much determined by the way white men see the world, who they think is going to be marketable, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
If you think about the exceptions, like hip hop came from the streets, right? It was an organically community driven, neighborhood driven music genre that emerged that then got like purchased and co-opted by the white music industry. But that's like such a historical thing, like jazz, country music, hip hop, R&B. Those all got like whitewashed and became like acceptable when white music gatekeepers were like, oh, we can make some money by like marketing these black artists. But at the heart of it, it's still the case that like who gets to be on TV, who gets to be on 92.3. There's probably some white dude somewhere up there with the money that says like this is okay and this is not okay.
Yeah.
And even with like even if something is of excellent quality, they're still going to push the argument of like, oh, it's not marketable to our viewers, it's not marketable to our demographic. That's why every cultural industry, publishing, music, Hollywood, it's overwhelmingly white because they just don't give the chance for Filipinos, Mexican artists to like take a risk. And if they do take a risk on them and they fail, then it punishes every other Filipino or Mexican artist that is next in line.
Man.
It's really, really fucked up. And this is why I think your podcast and social media and YouTube, they matter so much, because you don't need some random rich white dude to tell you can make a YouTube show or a podcast. And I will tell like, I'm saying this and I'm not even joking, and like 100% not joking. I've been doing interviews for my writing, for my topics of race, immigration, etc., etc. I've done it with NPR, New York Times, LA Times. I've done every single media platform you can think of, CNN, I have the way you have interviewed me is the top 1% of like
Oh, thank
quality
Ooh.
quality interviews, right?
you.
I am not even exaggerating or joking, but the reason that your shit is so on point when it comes to the questions you got or the conversation we're having is because you know the community so intimately. You
Yeah.
know these
Yeah.
issues. Like we grew up with the same sensibilities, the same type of environment. And so I'm not wasting my time conforming the way I talk or conforming the concepts that I'm conveying to you because I don't have to do that with you. You already know about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the types of questions you're asking me are not basic as fuck Filipino 101 questions or like Mexican American Studies 101. It's like it's for me whenever I get interviewed, and please don't cancel me, NPR, whoever out there, like, but whenever I get interviewed by like a really famous person for some nationally renowned podcast, I always find I'm like, yeah, that was nice, but I couldn't really hit the ground running because they're asking me such elementary questions. And a lot of times, even if the person's famous, I'm like, this shit is fucking boring. But like, this is why I was like, when you wrote me, I was like, I have to say yes to this because I knew for a fact that like the vibe of conversation, the rapport we're gonna have, the way in which our conversation is gonna evolve from minute one to whatever time we end. That is going to be an artful evolution in terms of the conversation. It's going to be rigorous. It's going to be loving. And most spaces where culture is produced or culture is determined to be culture, like they don't do that shit because it's always through the lens of like white folks that don't know shit about my history, my identity, my personhood. Sometimes don't even read the shit that I write. They just like invite you, and it's such a disservice to the incredible richness, not just the richness of me, but like the richness of like other POC creators.
Yeah. I mean,
And
I think. Oh, go ahead, babe.
and I think that's what Nico and I wanted to do with this podcast, not only with our own lives, to show people, like, being Filipino, being Mexican in the entertainment industry, but also inviting and getting to know people like you, which we are so happy that we did because we haven't had a guest who is a writer, who is a published author, who is I think we have had a gay guest before. I'm not sure. Have we?
No.
No. So you are our first, and we want to open that platform to we want to open our platform to, like, you, to other people to get to know you, people who might be Filipino or Mexican and that are gay, and like it's like, okay, like I didn't know Anthony even existed. I can finally read his book. I want to know how he is.
Yeah, and even more so too, like, going back to it, the experiences that I've had on my own, the experiences that Jackie has had on her own, like, and if you want to like put it in a way in which the white people do, for example, it's like I'm a straight Filipino male from San Francisco. Jackie is a straight Mexican woman from East LA. It's like there's only so much perspective that we can give from our personal backgrounds. And so, both me and Jackie and our audience, shout out to our audience too, like, are just always so ever evolving and open-minded and want to learn about these experiences. Like, it would be a disservice if me and Jackie talked about experiences that we haven't experienced. So, like, literally going through this entire podcast and even just getting a glimpse of your experience, like, I've learned a lot.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
I've learned a lot.
definitely.
well, it's kind of my job, right? So but no,
You're a professor too, right?
I am a college professor. Yes. So
Lit.
Wow.
yeah,
Love that.
it's
I'd take your class, by the way, if I was still in college.
Yeah, just
You
sign me up. Just sign me up.
but you all should definitely, like, whenever there's book events in LA or the Bay, or actually in LA, like there's gonna be a bunch of them. But I would love to have you come through, just because, like, I kid you not, like and I'm not trying to, like, I really mean it when you say, like, you two play a major role in helping to unravel like the whiteness of content production and in the creator world, and it's your skills are already so on point. I can't even imagine what they'll be when you hit my age. I just really hope like no one fucks with you and you get to keep doing what you do, you know?
Oh
Thank
man,
you.
we
Thank you.
appreciate that.
That means a lot.
Do you
Um,
have another book coming, or
I'm working on one. It's actually,
ooh,
this is the first time I'm talking about it, really.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
we're getting the exclusive.
Yeah. So I'm writing a book about Asian Americans in the criminal justice system. So
oh wow,
Wow.
yeah. We often think a lot about like Asian Americans. They get typecast as like model minorities, right? But
Mhm.
there's a lot of Asian Americans who are, you know, incarcerated. There's a lot of Asian Americans who have collisions with, you know, the law enforcement and such, and it doesn't always end well. I mean, the Bay
yeah,
Area, one of the stories I'm writing about right now is about this Filipino guy in Antioch, Angelo Quinto, who was having a mental health crisis that, you know, and then was killed by police. And so a lot of people, when they think about the criminal justice system, they often, when in race, they're thinking about like Black people and Latino people. But when it comes to Asian Americans, it's not something that really gets talked about. And I
Mhm.
yeah,
think like my motivation for doing this is because obviously you've seen so much stuff about like anti-Asian hate on the news.
Mhm.
yeah,
And yeah, you see the attacks on like people, but that's like the tip of the iceberg. And there's so much other shit happening under the surface that I think is worth telling that story about.
yeah.
Oh,
So
definitely.
You know, I think the comments might get on me about this, but now I'm getting a little bit emotional. But you know, especially over the pandemic, where me personally seeing a whole bunch of like older Filipino people get attacked, like whether it be in the Bay Area or New York, like it hit me
mhm.
so different, man. And I'm sorry.
No, that's
Like
okay.
it hit me so differently because I just felt like, man, that could have been like my grandma, that could have been my grandpa, that could have been like any of my family members too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What sucks about the entire hashtag situation with like stop AAP I hate, I just felt like it was a trend.
It
And
felt like it.
it just felt
Mhm.
like a trend, and it felt like everybody was just hopping on that momentarily. It went on for a couple months, and you know, now it's gone. And so the fact that you're writing a book about this, it gives me hope that that hashtag was just more than a hashtag.
Mhm.
That it is something that people like yourself really care about. And you're speaking for other people like myself who also realize like this is something that is still relevant to this day and we need to do something about it.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I appreciate the vulnerability because you're right. Like
Mhm.
that seeing those images was just wild. And it was like people that look just like my mom or grandma or tita,
Mhm.
to see them just doing like riding the bus or whatever, watering plants or walking, and then just to get, you know, so brutally attacked.
Mhm.
And I think that at the heart of it, like what it shows you is that Asian Americans, Filipinos are not, like a lot of people of color are not seen as fully human. And so it makes it okay for whoever's attacking them to do that, because if they're not fully human, if you know that they're not going to be protected by the law, like I, they will be targeted more likely than folks who you see as like people in power or folks that you have seen as fully human. Which, you know, this is
Mhm.
where like culture and movies, like white people get to be rendered fully human. Like they get to be all sorts of personality traits, but with us, like
Yeah.
we only get to be this one dimensional thing, which I think makes it easier for you to be a target of that kind of violence.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
one of the things I want to also talk about in this book is that, you know, what we're seeing with all these women that are being attacked, older people that are being attacked. It's important because in some ways it gives us a window into what Black Americans have been experiencing
Yeah.
for a very long time. A very like
Mhm.
and I think that the truth is, as much as we can be appalled by what we saw with George Floyd or Breonna Taylor, we have a different relationship to murders and those
Mhm.
incidents.
Yeah.
But when you see the things happening to folks that are like, you imagine your same household, it just lands differently. And I think that
Mhm.
to your point, Nico, like one of the things about Stop AAPI Hate is that it not only does it seem sort of trendy, and I remember going to the Glendale Americana and going to the Nike store, I'd be like, it's a Stop AAPI Hate. That's so weird, right? And Black
Mhm.
Lives Matter. The thing is, like, it can't just be like whenever we have Black Lives Matter or fighting for the rights of like Chicanos and Latinos or Asian Americans or indigenous rights, it can't just be that group that's fighting. Like the best way to go about it is a multiracial coalition
Mhm.
of like all people of color seeing that we're all being fucked by the same system of like
Yeah.
the same logics of white supremacy. And it's not
Mhm.
it doesn't do us a service when we divide those movements apart. But yeah, it's a really hard topic because of the stuff the documents I'm looking at, the video, it's just it's a lot. And so
Yeah,
Yeah.
I bet. When do you think we can expect that book to
oh
be
my
out?
gosh, when does my editor want me to have this book done?
When's the deadline?
When's
Yeah,
the deadline?
I it will probably be 2024. It just takes a while.
2024.
Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, I
honestly,
totally understand.
honestly, by then I think we definitely need a round 2 after we read that one.
Oh
Yes.
yeah, for sure. And I think like, I mean, Nico, you grew up in the Bay, right? So you know
Yeah.
for a fact that like there were some Filipinos and other Asian folks that were getting into some shit.
Oh
Like,
yeah. A
you
lot.
know, and a lot of people just don't think that or assume that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Still to this day. But hey, we can't wait for the book. And make sure you check out both of Anthony's books right now.
Mhm.
I had a quick question for Anthony before we wrap this up.
Yeah.
Well, I have quite a few questions. So, like, this is kind of gonna be like the non-serious questions of the podcast.
Yeah. Wait,
Kind of like,
and I want to ask a question of you too, as well.
okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Okay.
perfect.
I'll say mine. You go first.
Okay, so we kind of do like this or that type of questions, and just want kind of your like first reaction to whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay, hardcover books or ebooks?
Oh, fuck ebooks. I need to like have my book in my hand and dog ear the pages and write notes and sit by the fireplace if I had one and like read by the warm fire. But yeah, I'm sorry. I know some people read ebooks, but
That's the
I
old
like,
head mentality, huh?
yeah, I sorry. Oh god. So Amazon, whoever, do not cancel my ebooks because no. I actually like audiobooks better than ebooks. So I
okay.
like regular books, but I like regular audio than ebooks at the
Ebooks.
bottom.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, okay.
Now, second question: is lumpia an egg roll?
Yes.
Hell yeah. There we
go.
go.
Oh, Mexipino moment. When I was in 6th grade, though, I had like ethnic day, so we had to bring cuisine. I brought lumpia, and then my white teacher was like, "Oh my god, Anthony brought taquitos."
That means lumpia is a taquito.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
That's actually perfect into my next question.
Okay, yeah.
Do you think a taquito is just a rolled up taco?
Oh my god. No.
Thank you. Okay, see, he was on your side for the lumpia, babe. He was on my side for the taquito.
I'm just, I'm still 2 for 3, so I'm still good over here.
Okay, those are my questions.
Okay. Likewise, I think you all are doing amazing with this platform. What's next? What's the 5-10 year plan for you as content creators?
Oh wow,
this is the second time I've been asked this week.
Like in 2 days.
Yeah. That's crazy.
I think for me, the next step is becoming an entertainment reporter for, red carpet events, for music events. That's what I really want to do. I want to create a platform like that. As far as content creating, continuing the Mexipino podcast and seeing where it goes. Like we've grown so much in like less than a year that it's it's crazy to see how much we've grown, and the response we've been getting, even when we're just out. It's just like, hey, like, you guys are Mexipino podcast, right? And we're just like, yeah, like,
It's
yeah.
crazy. Like we'll be at like just at coffee shops, we'll be at like clubs, everything. And the impact that it has like really excites the both of us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I wanna like see you all as like a Jesus and Miro. Like I want to see you all on like TV hosting. Like I don't see any reason why you shouldn't be like on television doing a show like this. I could imagine this growing into something that like obviously the podcast you got to keep because like so many of like POC hosts started off with podcasts because they weren't allowed to do anything more. But I could totally imagine you all doing like I will wake up one day and see you on HBO Max and being like, oh, I'm gonna watch the Mexipino, whatever it's called.
There you go. That's what we want.
But yeah. So sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I guess that leads into like my 5 to 10 year plan because we do this podcast obviously. I am a DJ and I am also on the radio, and so for me like it's this weird thing about like growing your own personal brand, right? So whether it be like the Nico Blitz brand, I believe that like the bigger I grow my brand in radio, in DJing, in podcasting, the more I'm able to like show the next Filipino person like you can do literally all this too. Like you don't have to be a nurse, you don't have to be a lawyer, you don't have to do any of that if you don't want to. But not to knock it though, because at the end of the day, it's whatever you love to do. Is just what I want to inspire other Filipinos to do.
Yeah, but make no mistake, Nico will take your nurse money and your lawyer money for his projects.
You want something to invest in? We right here.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you talked to Rostin Covarrubias? Isn't that Inigo's manager?
Roz is like one of our close friends. So yeah.
I feel like you two are stars. So let her make you a star. Like
honestly, Roz has quick story, and we definitely need Roz on this podcast. She's just so damn busy. But Roz was actually the first person who I saw do anything similar to what I'm currently doing, to what we're currently doing. And when I first met Roz at a sushi restaurant to ask her all these questions about how to break through the industry, she gave me my first shine. She allowed me to blossom specifically as a Filipino American and to just do what I do. So huge shout out to Roz.
Yeah. I love it. It's please. I can't tell you how many times I thought my books would never happen. My writing would never see the light of day. And truth be told, I had an maybe I was delusional or had a ridiculous amount of self-belief because everything in the world was telling me you can't do this. But all it took was like one Filipino person or one. Actually, a lot of my mentors are Mexican American and Latino because they saw something in me. And so all you need is one person to like open that door. But I really want you two to bet on yourselves and bet on us because I see shit happening if you two do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That means a lot, Anthony. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anthony. Yeah, and that's a perfect way to end the podcast. Yes. My name is Nico Blitz.
I'm Jackie Ramirez. And Anthony, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Anthony Ocampo and at Instagram at anthonyocampo.phd. So troll me on Twitter and Instagram. So
yeah. So
thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you guys next time. Adios.
Peace out.